Welcome to QGC Network. Today's short story is called A Fall of a Queen. Listen to the story and answer the questions as they appear. There are 8 questions. Remember, this fictional story is based on a historical event. In the lush blooms of spring in 1536, a shadow of uncertainty fell over the heart of London. My name is Isabel, and I was a handmaid to Queen Anne Boleyn. The story I am about to tell is filled with intrigue and the sombre threads of fate, beginning as the once cheerful atmosphere of our palace turned grim under heavy, ominous clouds. As the fresh scents of Mayflowers filled the air, an uneasy murmur grew amongst the courtiers at the palace. The gardens, usually a place of leisure and laughter, echoed with hushed conversations about treason and conspiracies. During these tense days, my duties brought me closer to the Queen, and I found myself not just a servant, but also a confidant in her most vulnerable moments. Although the sun shone brightly on the clear morning of the 2nd of May 1536, a stifling atmosphere enveloped us. The king had made a shocking decision. Queen Anne was to be arrested. The news spread like wildfire, creating a buzz of disbelief and fear. The queen, maintaining her regal demeanour while sipping her morning tea, betrayed a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. When the king's guards arrived, their armour gleaming under the sunlight, the clatter of their approach echoed ominously through the grand halls of the palace. Standing with grace as they entered, Anne held her head high, embodying the dignity of royalty. Yet when she placed her trembling hands in mine, she whispered, "Isabel, stay close," with a calm that sharply contrasted with the surrounding chaos. The journey to the Tower of London was silent, except for the creaking of the carriage and the distant toll of city bells. The Queen sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery, her mind undoubtedly racing with thoughts I could not fathom. My heart ached for her. Once a beloved queen, now a prisoner of the very kingdom she had served with passion and dedication. As the heavy gates of the tower closed with a resounding clang, a shiver of foreboding ran down my spine. We were led through a labyrinth of cold, damp stone corridors that echoed with the lonely footsteps of our guards. The air inside the tower was thick with a musty, metallic scent, a stark contrast to the fresh spring air we had left behind. Queen Anne's new quarters were a small, dimly lit chamber, a far cry from the opulent surroundings she was accustomed to. The sparse furnishings included only a narrow bed, a small wooden table, and a stiff, high-backed chair. The small window, barred and grimy, admitted only a feeble light, casting long shadows on the cold stone floor. Upon entering, Anne stood motionless for a moment, her eyes scanning every corner of the room as if trying to absorb the reality of her situation. Then, with a deep breath that seemed to steady her, she said, "Isabel, we shall need to make this place somewhat livable." Her voice, though trembling, was laced with resolve. Together, we began organising the space. I fetched a broom from one of the guards and swept the floor, trying to clear away the dust and debris that had accumulated over the years of neglect. Anne, despite her royal status, draped her own cloak over the bed to make it look less bare, and arranged her few personal items, a small prayer book, a locket containing a portrait of her daughter Elizabeth, and a piece of embroidery she had been working on the table, infusing the stark room with small touches of her presence. As the afternoon waned into evening, the reality of her confinement seemed to settle around us like the thick tower fog. Anne paced the room slowly, her steps measured and thoughtful. She stopped occasionally at the window, looking out at the grey skies, her expression deep in contemplation. I could only imagine the storm of thoughts and fears swirling in her mind. "Isabel," Anne suddenly said, turning from the window with a look of determined calm, "I have been thinking. This situation is dire but not hopeless. I must not let despair take hold." Her voice, usually so vibrant and commanding, was softer now, but every bit as compelling. I listened intently as she spoke of her plans to defend herself and her rights, her words weaving through the dim light of our confined space. "We must keep our wits about us. The truth of my innocence must come to light," she continued, her tone infused with a quiet strength. As evening approached, a simple meal was brought in by the tower guard. The food was coarse and plain, a far cry from the lavish feasts of the palace. We ate in silence, the gravity of the situation rendering words superfluous. After our meal, Anne knelt by the side of her makeshift bed, her lips moving silently in prayer. Watching her, I felt a profound respect for the depth of her faith and the resilience of her spirit. That night, as Anne lay in her bed, I took a small pallet on the floor beside her. The sounds of the tower at night were eerie and unsettling. The distant clanking of chains, the soft hoot of an owl outside, and the occasional murmur of the guards' voices. Sleep was fitful and fleeting for both of us. I awoke several times to find Anne staring at the ceiling, her eyes glistening in the dim light, lost in thought. Her whispered words from earlier echoed in my mind. "Remember, no matter what happens, we know the truth." Those words, spoken with such conviction, seemed to linger in the cold air, a testament to her unyielding spirit. This first night in the tower marked the beginning of a harrowing ordeal, but also a profound testament to Queen Anne's strength and dignity. As her handmaiden, I was a witness to the quiet power that she wielded, not with a sword, but with her courage and her unbreakable resolve. It was a power that would inspire me and change me in ways I could never have anticipated. Over the next few days, I watched a transformation in Anne. The initial shock gave way to a resilience that fortified her spirit. She spent hours by the window staring out at the grey skies, her thoughts as turbulent as the swirling winds outside. Despite the grim rumours that reached our ears, accusations of treason, witchcraft, even adultery, Anne's resolve only hardened. "I am innocent, Isabel," she confided in me one evening, her voice steady. "But innocence is a fragile shield against power." Her trial on the 15th of May was a theatrical spectacle, designed more to entertain than to serve justice. We walked together to the great hall, her hand resting lightly on my arm for support. The hall was crowded, faces of those she once considered friends now stared back coldly. Anne's grace under such scrutiny was admirable. She faced each accusation with a poise that made her seem more like a queen than ever. Witnesses, one after another, presented fabricated tales and evidence against her. I stood by her side, offering silent solidarity. Anne's rebuttals were eloquent and dignified, aimed not just at her accusers, but at the annals of history where her words would echo forever. "Remember, no matter what happens, we know the truth," she told me during a brief recess. Her confidence was inspiring, yet the sadness in her eyes spoke of the inevitable. The verdict was as expected: guilty. It was delivered with a cold formality that made the air in the room turn icy. Anne simply nodded, accepting her fate with an almost unearthly grace. As we returned to her cell, She paused to touch the cold stone walls, whispering, "Even these stones will remember my innocence." The days between the trial and her execution were heavy with sorrow, yet Anne's demeanour was composed, almost serene. She wrote letters and prayed, and when she spoke to me, her words were of comfort and reassurance. "Be strong, Isabel. We must all face our end one day. I choose to face mine with courage." On the morning of her execution, the 19th of May, Anne dressed in a gown of deep red, the colour of martyrdom. She looked every inch the queen she was as she stepped out to meet her fate. Her final walk to the scaffold was dignified, her steps measured. "Remember me not for how I die, but for how I lived," she whispered to me, her final request. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. A profound silence enveloped the crowd. It was as if the world paused, mourning the fall of a queen.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. Listening to short stories in English is a great way to improve pronunciation and understanding. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more English lessons.